I want to tell you something today that will change everything you believe about yourself. I want to remind you of something you've forgotten, something the world has made you forget. You think you are small, you think you are weak, you think you are just this body that ages and breaks, just this mind that worries and doubts. But I am here to wake you up from this dream, this terrible dream of limitation. You are not what you think you are. You are infinite. You are eternal. You are the soul that never dies. Look at yourself right now. What do you see? You see a person with problems, don't you? You see someone who is tired, someone who is struggling, someone who carries the weight of so many worries on their shoulders. Maybe you are worried about money, maybe about relationships, maybe about what will happen tomorrow or next year. Maybe you feel like you are not enough, like you keep failing, like no matter how hard you try, you cannot reach that place of peace and happiness you are searching for. I understand this. I see this suffering everywhere I go. People walk around like shadows of what they truly are, believing the lies that life has told them about themselves. But today, I am going to tell you the truth. And this truth is so beautiful, so powerful, that once you really understand it, once you really feel it in your bones, your entire life will transform. Nothing will be able to shake you anymore. No failure, no loss, no fear will have power over you, because you will remember who you truly are. You see, the greatest tragedy in this world is not poverty, it is not disease, it is not even death itself. The greatest tragedy is that the children of immortality, the beings of infinite power and infinite light, have forgotten their own nature. They have been hypnotized into believing they are mere mortals, weak creatures at the mercy of fate and circumstance. This is the real suffering. This is the root of all pain. We have forgotten our true self. Let me ask you something very simple. When you were a small child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, who were you then? Can you remember? You had a body then, but it was different from the body you have now. You had thoughts then, but they were different from the thoughts you have now. Everything about you has changed. The cells in your body have died and been replaced thousands of times. The beliefs you held as a child are gone. The fears you had then have changed. The person you thought you were back then is completely different from the person you think you are today. So tell me, who is the real you? If everything about you changes, what is it that remains the same? What is it that has been watching all these changes happen? This is what I want you to understand. There is something in you that never changes. There is something in you that was there when you were born, that will be there when you take your last breath, and that will continue beyond even that. This something is not your body. Your body is like clothes you wear. You change clothes every day, but you remain you. Your body changes every moment, but you remain you. This something is not your mind either. Your thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. One moment you are happy, the next moment you are sad. One day you believe one thing, the next day you believe something else. But through all these changing thoughts and moods, something remains constant. Something is watching all of this happen. Something is aware. That something is your true self. That something is your soul. And that soul is eternal. That soul is infinite. That soul is perfect and pure, and has never been touched by any suffering, any failure, any sin. You are not this limited person you think you are. You are not defined by your past mistakes. You are not limited by your current circumstances. You are not the labels that society has put on you. You are not your job title, your bank balance, your success or failure in the eyes of the world. All of these things are just temporary costumes you are wearing in this great drama of life. But the real you, the essential you, the eternal you, is far beyond all of this. Consider the ocean and its waves. Each wave rises, thinking perhaps, I am unique, I am separate, I am this particular wave. It crashes upon the shore with great drama, then dissolves back into the ocean. Was the wave ever separate from the ocean? No, it was always the ocean, merely expressing itself in that particular form for that brief moment. You are like that wave. You rise from the infinite ocean of consciousness, take a particular form, play your part, and eventually merge back into that same infinite reality. But here is what most people miss. Even while you are the wave, you are still the ocean. The wave is not something other than the ocean. It is the ocean itself, dancing, playing, expressing its nature. This understanding changes everything. When you know that your true nature is this infinite consciousness, this boundless existence, then what is there to fear? What can truly threaten you? Your body may age and die, but you are not just the body. Your mind may experience 1,000 storms, but you are not just the mind. These are instruments you use, vehicles you drive, but they are not your essence. Let me tell you about something I witnessed many times in India. When a great actor performs in a play, he may play the role of a beggar one night and a king the next. When he plays the beggar, does he actually become poor? When he plays the king, does he actually gain a kingdom? No, he knows he is acting. He plays the role fully, completely, but he never forgets who he really is. This is the secret of living in this world without suffering. Play your role completely. Be the best student, the best parent, the best worker you can be. But remember always that you are acting a part on the stage of life. The great souls, the liberated ones, are those who have remembered their true nature even while playing their parts. But you might ask me, if I realize that everything is temporary, that all my roles are just costumes, won't I become indifferent? Won't I stop caring about anything? No, my friend. 1,000 times no. In fact, the opposite happens. When you know your true nature, you become free to love more fully, to act more courageously, to give more completely. Why? Because you are no longer paralyzed by fear of loss. Think about it. Why do people hold back from loving fully? Because they fear the pain of losing that love. Why do people avoid taking risks to pursue their dreams? Because they fear the pain of failure. Why do people cling so desperately to money, to status, to the approval of others? Because they have mistaken these temporary things for their true identity, and they fear that without them, they will cease to exist. But when you know that your true self cannot be diminished, cannot be destroyed, cannot be taken away by any force in this universe, then you become fearless, not reckless, but fearless. There is a difference. Recklessness comes from ignorance. Fearlessness comes from wisdom. The fearless person acts with clarity, with purpose, with love, because they know that regardless of the outcome in this temporary world, their essential nature remains untouched, perfect, complete. When I walked among the masses in India, I saw two kinds of suffering. The first was the suffering of the poor, those who hungered, who lacked shelter, who struggled daily for survival. The second was the suffering of the wealthy, those who had everything the world could offer, yet remained empty, anxious, restless, afraid of losing what they possessed. Both suffered from the same root cause, identification with the temporary, with the perishable. The poor man fears death because he believes he has not yet truly lived. The rich man fears death because he must abandon all he has accumulated. But the fearless person, having realized their true nature, looks at both poverty and wealth as passing clouds against the unchanging sky of consciousness. I remember standing at the edge of the Ganges one evening, watching the sun descend. An old man approached me, his face etched with lines of worry. "Swami," he said, "I have lived 70 years, and death approaches. I am terrified. What lies beyond?" I asked him a simple question. "What lies beyond sleep each night when you close your eyes?" He paused. "Nothing. I simply wake up again." "Exactly," I told him. "Death is but sleep, and what awakens is the eternal self that was never born and cannot die. The body returns to dust, the breath returns to air. But you, the witness, the consciousness that has observed every moment of your life that remains. This understanding does not come from books alone, though sacred texts point the way. It does not come from rituals alone, though they may prepare the mind. It comes from direct experience, from turning the gaze inward, from asking with burning intensity, 'Who am I, truly, beneath all these layers of identity?' Consider how you say, 'my body, my mind, my thoughts.' The very language reveals the truth. If you say, 'my body,' then who is the owner? If you say, 'my mind,' then who possesses this mind? There is a silent witness behind all experiences, and that witness is your true self. That witness has never suffered, never feared, never died. It simply is. But here lies the magnificent challenge of human existence. Knowing this intellectually is not enough. The knowledge must descend from the head to the heart, from theory to lived reality. This is why I emphasize not just meditation, but action. Not just contemplation, but service. Not just wisdom, but love. When you serve another being, when you feed the hungry or comfort the suffering, you are not doing charity to someone separate from you. You are serving yourself in another form. This is the secret of karma yoga, the path of action. The fear of the other dissolves when you recognize yourself in all beings. How can you fear what is essentially your own self? I challenge you now with a truth that may disturb your comfortable assumptions. Your fear of death is actually fear of life. You fear death because you have never truly lived. You have existed on the surface, skating across the frozen lake of convention, never daring to break through to the depths below. You have been so busy becoming what others expect, so consumed with acquiring and protecting, that you have forgotten to ask the most vital question. What is the purpose of this precious human birth? Let me tell you what I told the young men of India who came seeking guidance. You are not here to merely survive. You are not here to simply reproduce your species and die. You are here to manifest divinity, to express the infinite potential locked within you, to become a channel through which the divine expresses itself in this world. Look at yourself in this moment, not with the eyes of criticism or judgment, but with the eyes of a scientist examining a magnificent mystery. You are a paradox walking, infinite potential wrapped in finite flesh, eternity expressing itself through time, the formless dancing within form. And yet, how do most of you live? As if you were merely accidents of biology, as if consciousness were nothing more than a chemical reaction, as if your deepest yearnings for meaning were simply evolutionary tricks. This is the great tragedy of modern existence. You have access to more information than any generation in history, yet you know less about your own nature than the simplest village sage sitting beneath a tree. You can split the atom, but you cannot unite your own divided hearts. You can send signals across the planet in milliseconds, but you cannot send love across the dinner table. You have built monuments to human ingenuity that touch the clouds, but you have not built the inner sanctuary where peace resides. When I walked the streets of your great cities, I saw wealth beyond the imagination of ancient kings, yet I saw poverty of spirit that no amount of gold could cure. I saw people rushing everywhere, yet going nowhere. Movement without direction is not progress, it is merely exhaustion dressed up as ambition. And this is what I see among so many of you. You are exhausted, aren't you? Exhausted from trying to become someone you already are. Exhausted from seeking externally what can only be found internally. Exhausted from building a life that looks impressive from the outside while feeling hollow from the inside. But I did not come here to deepen your despair. I came to shatter the illusion that creates it. The answer is not to escape the world, not to deny the body, not to reject the mind. This is where so many spiritual teachings have led you astray. They have made divinity seem like something distant, something to be achieved only through renunciation of everything that makes you human. No, 1,000 times, no. Your humanity is not the obstacle to your divinity. It is the very instrument through which divinity must be expressed. Every cell in your body is a universe unto itself. Every thought that arises in your mind is energy taking form. Every emotion that moves through you is the divine, experiencing itself through the lens of individuality. You are not separate from God, seeking to return to God. You are God pretending to have forgotten, so that you might experience the joy of remembering. Let me make this practical, because philosophy without application is merely entertainment for the intellect. You wake up tomorrow morning. Before you reach for your phone, before you begin the mental litany of everything you must do, what if you paused? What if you took one conscious breath and recognized, I am alive, I am aware, I am the witness of this moment. Not as a religious ritual, but as a simple acknowledgement of the miracle that you are. That shift from I am lost to I am aware changes everything. Because awareness is not passive, it is the most active force in the universe. When you become aware of your suffering, you begin to separate from it. When you become aware of your thoughts, you are no longer their prisoner. When you become aware of your breath, you touch the eternal present. This is what the sages discovered, not through worship, but through observation. They sat, they watched. They noticed that beneath the storm of emotion, beneath the noise of thought, there was something still, something unchanging, something that had never been born and could never die. They called it Atman, the self, the witness. And here is the truth that shook them to the core. That witness was not separate from the divine. It times was times the divine. Not a spark of God, not a fragment, but God itself, experiencing the world through the eyes of form. This is not philosophy, this is biology, this is physics. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself. Every sensation, every thought, every moment of beauty or pain, it is the cosmos waking up, looking through your eyes, feeling through your heart. When you say, I am nothing, you are closer to the truth than when you say, I am something special. But go further. Say, I am no thing, not an object, not a fixed identity, but the space in which all things arise, the awareness in which this entire movie of life plays out. Do you see the freedom in that? If you are the screen, not the movie, then no scene can destroy you. The horror film doesn't burn the screen, the tragedy doesn't stain it. The screen remains untouched, witnessing it all, holding it all, without ever becoming it. This is what I mean when I say you are immortal. Not your body, not your personality, not your achievements or your legacy. But the consciousness that animates all of it times is deathless. And once you know this, truly know it, you stop clinging, you stop grasping, you stop demanding that life conform to your script. Because you realize you are not the actor trying to survive. You are the entire theater. The ancient texts put it plainly, asterisk tat tavam asi, asterisk thou art that. You are not separate from the divine intelligence that spins galaxies and orchestrates the dance of atoms. You are not observing the universe from the outside. You are the universe, briefly localized in this body, this name, this story. And when this truth penetrates not as an idea, but as a lived reality, you begin to move through the world differently. You stop asking, what can I get? And start asking, what can I give? You stop measuring your worth by external validation and start recognizing your inherent completeness. You breathe, and you know, this breath is a gift. You see, and you know, this sight is a miracle. You feel, and you know, even pain is proof that you are alive, that you are here, that you are real. This is not about escaping life, it's about times entering times it fully. Most people spend their entire lives living at the surface, chasing, avoiding, reacting. They never dive deep, they never ask the real questions, they die without ever meeting themselves. But you, right now, you can make a different choice. You can stop, you can turn inward, you can ask, who is aware of all this? And in that question, something ancient awakens. Something that has been waiting your entire life for you to notice it. That awareness is not the product of the mind. It is not created by your thoughts. It is the canvas upon which all thoughts are painted. You see, the mind tells you stories constantly. It says, I am anxious, I am sad, I am successful, I am failing. But who is listening to these stories? Who remains untouched by them, simply observing? This is the radical shift I am pointing to. You are not the character in the story. You are the space in which the story unfolds. When you identify with the character, you suffer its fate. You rise and fall with every plot twist. But when you recognize yourself as the awareness behind it all, you discover something unshakable. Let me give you an example from my own life. When I first came to America, I carried the weight of my mission like a mountain on my shoulders. I thought, I must succeed. I must bring India's message to the West. If I fail, I will have wasted this opportunity. Every hostile question, every empty lecture hall felt like a personal catastrophe. I was imprisoned in the story of Vivekananda, the missionary. Then one morning, sitting by Lake Michigan, something shifted. The waves rolled in with perfect indifference to my mission. The seagulls cried without consulting my anxieties. And I asked myself, who is worried? I found the worry. I found the thoughts about failure. But behind them I found a vast, quiet presence that was simply aware. That presence wasn't concerned with success or failure. It wasn't diminished by criticism or inflated by praise. It simply was. From that moment, I could still give lectures. I could still debate. But I was no longer trapped inside the story. I was the awareness watching the story unfold. And paradoxically, this made me more effective, not less. Because I was no longer defending an identity, I was simply expressing truth from a place of freedom. This is what I mean when I say you must wake up within your own life. Most people are dreaming even when their eyes are open. They are lost in the narrative the mind creates. I need this to be happy. I can't handle that. If only this would change, then I would be at peace. These are the dreams of the waking world. But you can wake up right now. Not by changing your circumstances. Not by achieving some future state, but by recognizing what you already are. You are not the thoughts, you are the knower of thoughts. You are not the emotions, you are the space in which emotions arise and dissolve. You are not the body, You are the consciousness that illuminates the body's sensations. This is not philosophy, this is direct recognition, and it requires no belief, no faith, no special knowledge. It requires only that you look, not with your eyes, but with your attention. Where is your sense of I located? When you say, I am here, what are you really pointing to? Most people will gesture toward their head or their chest. But if you investigate carefully, you'll find that your sense of self has no location. It's not in your body. It's not in your mind. It's the spacious awareness that contains the body and mind. It has no boundaries, no center, no edges. It is vast, open, and utterly free. And here is the beautiful paradox. This awareness is simultaneously the most intimate thing you know and the most universal. It is closer to you than your own heartbeat, yet it is the same awareness that looks through every pair of eyes. When you meet another person, it is awareness meeting itself. When you look at a tree, a mountain, a star, it is awareness becoming conscious of its own manifestations. This is why the ancient scriptures say, "Thou art that." You are not separate from the divine, you are its expression, not in some poetic, metaphorical sense, but literally. The consciousness that reads these words right now is the same consciousness that sustains the cosmos. There is only one awareness, appearing as many. This is why the saints speak of seeing God in all things. They are not being poetic. They are describing direct perception. When the veil of separation drops, you see the same presence looking through every pair of eyes. The beggar on the street, the king in his palace, the child playing in the dust behind each face, the same infinite awareness peers out at itself. I remember standing before an audience once, and suddenly seeing not separate individuals, but one consciousness pretending to be many. Like one actor playing all the parts in a cosmic drama, then forgetting it is acting. The illusion is so complete, so convincing, that we actually believe we are separate beings. But look closely at your experience right now. Where does the boundary of you actually exist? Can you find a line where awareness ends and something else begins? You cannot. Because there is no boundary. The I that you feel is not confined to this body. It is the infinite expressing itself through this temporary form. The wave believes it is separate from the ocean. But remove the water, and what remains of the wave? Nothing. The wave is simply the ocean in motion. You are consciousness in motion, pure awareness, temporarily identifying with form. This understanding changes everything. If there is only one consciousness, then every act of kindness you perform to yourself. Every cruelty you inflict upon yourself. The person you help today is you in a different costume. The enemy you destroy is you having forgotten your true identity. This is not morality imposed from outside. This is recognition of what is. When you truly see that we are one, hatred becomes impossible. How can you hate yourself? Fear dissolves. How can you fear yourself? Competition transforms into cooperation. How can you compete with yourself? The whole ethical structure of existence becomes clear without a single commandment. You treat others with respect, not because a scripture demands it, but because you recognize yourself in them. You serve humanity not out of obligation, but out of natural expression. Just as the sun shines without asking why, the awakened being serves without needing a reason. But we are so identified with the body, with the story of me, that we cannot see beyond it. We have been hypnotized by our own reflection. We stare at the mirror and forget we are not the image, but that which observes the image. The spiritual path, then, is not about adding something new. It is about removing the false identifications. You are not your thoughts, they come and go, but you remain. You are not your emotions, they rise and fall like weather, but the sky of your awareness is untouched. You are not your body, it changes every moment, yet something in you recognizes continuity. What you are is the unchanging witness of all that changes, the eternal observer of the temporary show. And this observer is not personal to you. It is the one observer appearing as many observation points. Think of it like space. The space in this room appears separate from the space in the next room. But break down the walls, and you discover there was never any division. Space is space. Similarly, consciousness is consciousness. The walls of the ego create an appearance of separation, but the separation is not real. This is the truth that all mystical traditions have discovered, not through philosophy alone, but through direct experience. The Sufi who loses himself in the whirling dance, The Christian saint who experiences union with Christ, the Buddhist monk who dissolves into emptiness, the Vedantic sage who realizes Brahman, they are all arriving at the same shore, though they sailed from different ports. And yet, we fight. We draw lines in the sand and say, my religion is true, yours is false. We kill each other over words, over rituals, over interpretations of ancient texts. This is the tragedy of humanity, not that we don't know the truth, but that we know it and yet refuse to live it. I am not asking you to abandon your religion. I am asking you to deepen it. Go to its very root. If you are a Christian, don't stop at the surface level of rituals and doctrines. Dive deep into the experience of Christ himself. When he said, I and my Father are one, he was not making a theological statement, he was describing a state of consciousness. When he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you, he was pointing to the same truth that the Upanishads declare, Tat Tavam Asi, thou art that. If you are a Muslim, go beyond the external practices. Yes, pray 5 times a day, but let each prayer be a dissolution of the ego, a surrender of the limited self into the infinite. The Sufis understood this. When they say, Ain al-Haq, I am the truth, they are not being blasphemous. They are expressing the highest realization. If you are a Hindu, don't be satisfied with worshipping stone idols and performing empty rituals. Understand what those symbols represent. The idol is not God, it is a support for your meditation, a focus point for your devotion. The real temple is within your own heart. The real puja is the offering of your ego at the altar of self-realization. If you are a Buddhist, go beyond the words of the Buddha. He himself said, be a light unto yourself. Don't cling to scriptures. Don't make the finger into the moon. Experience for yourself what he experienced under the Bodhi tree. And if you claim to be an atheist, I say to you, you are not rejecting God, you are rejecting a childish concept of God. You are rejecting the old man in the sky who rewards and punishes. Good. That concept should be rejected. But don't stop there. Inquire deeply. What is the consciousness that doubts? What is the awareness that questions? That which is aware in you, investigate it. Follow it to its source. You may not call it God, but when you find it, you will know you have found something infinite, something eternal. Now, let me address the inevitable question. If this is true, if we are all one consciousness, then why should we be moral? Why not steal, lie, cheat, kill? If there is no separate self, who is there to be punished? This question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. Morality is not imposed from outside. It is not a set of rules given by an external authority. True morality arises spontaneously from the understanding of oneness. When you realize that the other person is not separate from you, how can you harm them? It would be like cutting your own hand. When you see the same self in all beings, compassion is not a duty, it is a natural expression of your understanding. The person who asks, why shouldn't I steal if there is no God to punish me, has not understood at all. Such a person is still operating from the level of the ego, still calculating personal advantage. But when the ego dissolves, when you realize your unity with all existence, the very desire to harm disappears. This is why the truly enlightened beings have been the most compassionate, not because they were following rules, but because they saw themselves in everyone. Buddha felt the suffering of all beings as his own. Christ wept for humanity. Ramakrishna went into samadhi, seeing the suffering of the poor. This is not philosophy, my friend. This is not theology. This is the science of consciousness itself. When you meditate deeply enough, when you truly still the modifications of the mind, something extraordinary happens. The walls begin to dissolve. The boundaries you thought were so solid, so real, they start to shimmer and fade. You sit in your room, in your body, and suddenly you feel the breath of your neighbor as if it were your own. You feel the hunger of the child 3 streets away. You feel the loneliness of the widow in the apartment below. This is not imagination. This is direct perception. The ancient texts call it times pratibha, times spontaneous enlightenment, direct knowing without the intermediary of the senses. Modern science is beginning to discover what the yogis have known for millennia. Mirror neurons, they call them. The brain literally mirrors the states of others. But this is just the surface, the biochemical shadow of a far deeper truth. I have experienced this myself. In meditation, I have felt my consciousness expand beyond this small frame, until there was no difference between myself and the beggar on the street, between myself and the bird in the tree, between myself and you who listens to these words right now. And when you come back from such experiences, when you return to the ordinary world of names and forms, you cannot help but be changed. How can you hurt another when you have felt their pain as your own? How can you remain indifferent when you have experienced their joy as your joy, their sorrow as your sorrow? This is why I say, spiritual realization without service is incomplete. If you have truly seen the one and all, if you have truly understood that you and I are waves in the same ocean, then compassion is not a choice. It is the only possible response. But here is the paradox, the beautiful paradox that confounds the intellect. In serving others, you serve yourself. Not in some metaphorical sense, not as a pleasant spiritual platitude, but as literal fact. When you feed the hungry, you nourish the same universal life that sustains your own body. When you comfort the suffering, you heal the same consciousness that animates your being. When you educate the ignorant, you enlighten the same awareness that peers out through your eyes. The Upanishads declare, *tat tavam asi times, that thou art. Not, you are like that, or you should try to be like that, but you are that, right now, already, always. The separation is the illusion, the unity is the reality. And once you begin to live from this truth, even for a moment, even imperfectly, your entire life transforms. The question is no longer what can I get, but what can I give? Not out of duty, not out of moral obligation, but out of the simple recognition that giving and receiving are the same act seen from different angles. The tree gives fruit. Does it diminish the tree? No, it fulfills the tree's very nature. The sun gives light. Does it become less? No, giving is its essence, its glory, its purpose. And you are that same divine energy in human form. Your nature is to give, to serve, to love, to uplift. When you block this natural flow, when you contract into the small self, into the separate ego, you suffer. It is as simple as that. Depression, anxiety, meaninglessness. These are the diseases of disconnection. When we forget our connection to the whole, when we try to live as isolated fragments, the soul withers. But the moment you step out of yourself, the moment you extend your hand to another in genuine service, something shifts, the darkness lifts. Meaning returns. You remember who you are. This is the secret that all the great spiritual traditions have tried to convey in their different languages, through their different symbols. But here's what they didn't always tell you clearly enough. This isn't about escaping the world. This isn't about rejecting your humanity. This isn't about sitting in a cave and pretending you have no needs, no desires, no personality. I traveled across America, and everywhere I went, people had this misconception. They thought spirituality meant becoming some sort of ethereal being who floats above human concerns. They thought enlightenment meant you stop laughing, stop eating with pleasure, stop engaging with life. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you realize you are the infinite consciousness, you don't become less human, you become more human. You become fully human for the first time. Because now you're not trying to use your humanity to prove something. You're not trying to use your achievements to establish your worth. You're not performing your personality, hoping someone will validate it. You're simply expressing what you are, the way a river expresses water, the way a tree expresses life. Your personality doesn't disappear, it becomes transparent. It becomes what it always was meant to be, a unique flavor of the infinite, a particular melody in the cosmic symphony. Think of it this way. Before, you were like an actor who had forgotten he was acting. You were so identified with your role that you thought the character's problems were real, the character's limitations were absolute, the character's death would be the end of everything. Now you remember. You're still playing the role, in fact. You play it better than ever, but you know it's a role. You know the script isn't the totality of who you are. This knowing changes everything. When success comes, you enjoy it fully, but you're not inflated by it. When failure comes, you learn from it, but you're not destroyed by it. When praise arrives, you receive it gracefully, but you don't need it. When criticism appears, you consider it carefully, but you're not defined by it. You move through life like water flowing, adapting to every container, taking every shape, but never forgetting your essential nature. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop trying to be special, you discover that you already are. Not special in comparison to others, that's just ego again, but special in the way every snowflake is special, every sunset, every moment of existence. Your exact combination of qualities, your perspective, your way of seeing and experiencing the world. This has never existed before and will never exist again. Not because you made yourself special through effort, but because uniqueness is the nature of manifestation. The infinite expressing itself through your particular form creates something unprecedented. How could it be otherwise? But you're only free to express this authentic uniqueness when you're not trying to use it to establish your worth. When your worth is already established, not earned, not proven, but recognized as inherent, then your uniqueness can flow naturally. This is what I mean by freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom within the world. Not freedom from being human, but freedom from the suffering that comes from misunderstanding what being human actually means. You still have preferences, you don't suddenly like everything equally. You still have desires, you don't become some desireless automaton. You still have personality, you don't turn into some bland, generic, spiritual person. But now these preferences, desires, and personality traits are held lightly. They're like clothes you wear, not like skin you can't remove. You can engage fully with life, throw yourself completely into whatever you're doing, care deeply about outcomes, and simultaneously rest in the awareness that regardless of how things turn out, the essence of what you are remains untouched. This isn't detachment in the sense of not caring, it's detachment in the sense of not being enslaved. When enslavement ends, something remarkable happens. You become more effective in the world, not less. This is the great paradox that confuses people who misunderstand what I teach. They think spiritual wisdom makes you passive, withdrawn, ineffective. The opposite is true. Think of the person who is enslaved by the need for approval. How much energy do they waste calculating how others will react? How often do they compromise their deepest convictions because they fear judgment? How many opportunities do they miss because they're paralyzed by the question, what will people think? Now consider someone who has broken those chains. They act from their truth, they speak with clarity. They pursue what matters without constantly looking over their shoulder. They're not reckless, they still consider consequences, but they're no longer controlled by opinion. Which person do you think accomplishes more? Which one creates genuine impact? The enslaved person exhausts themselves seeking something outside themselves. The free person pours that same energy into purposeful action. This is why the Gita's teaching on karma yoga selfless action is so transformative. When you act without attachment to fruit, you're not acting half-heartedly. You're acting with complete energy, complete focus, complete integrity, because your motivation comes from something deeper than personal gain. I've watched this principle transform lives. A man came to me once, a businessman, completely burned out. Everything was about winning, about getting ahead, about proving himself. His health was failing, his relationships were destroyed. Even his success felt hollow. I didn't tell him to abandon business. I told him, do your work, but change why you do it. Stop working to prove something. Stop working to fill an emptiness inside. Work because the work itself is worth doing. Work because you can serve through it. Work because excellence is its own reward. He thought I was giving him permission to fail. But what happened was the opposite. When he stopped being enslaved by the need to win, he became better at what he did. His decisions improved because they weren't distorted by fear and desperation. His relationships healed because he stopped using people as means to his ends. His success actually increased, but more importantly, it satisfied him in a way it never had before. Because it was no longer a band-aid for a wound that success could never heal. This is what happens when understanding deepens. You don't become less engaged with life, you become engaged in a completely different way, a way that's simultaneously more passionate and more peaceful. Let me give you another angle on this, because I want you to see how practical this wisdom is. Consider your relationships. Most human suffering in relationships comes from confusion between love and need. We think we love someone, but actually, we need them. We need them to make us feel worthy, to validate us, to complete us, to save us from loneliness. And then we call this need love. But need is bondage. When you need someone, you try to control them. You become anxious when they don't behave according to your expectations. You become possessive, jealous, demanding. The relationship becomes a prison for both of you. This isn't love. This is mutual enslavement dressed up as love. Real love exists only in freedom. When you know yourself as complete, as whole, as that infinite reality that lacks nothing, then you can love without need. You can give freely without demanding return. You can appreciate the other person for who they are, not for what they do for you. You can allow them space to grow, to change, even to leave if that's their path, because your fundamental okayness doesn't depend on them. This doesn't make relationships less intimate. It makes them more intimate, because now you're meeting as two whole beings, not as two halves trying to complete each other. The relationship becomes an expression of abundance, not a desperate attempt to fill deficiency. You see this dynamic play out everywhere once you understand it. Watch how a secure person navigates conflict. When their partner is upset, they don't immediately become defensive or collapse into apology. They can hold space for the other person's emotions without making those emotions about themselves. They listen with genuine curiosity. Tell me more about what you're feeling. Help me understand your experience. Compare this to insecure attachment. When faced with upset, the anxious person spirals. You hate me, don't you? I knew I'd mess this up. I'm so sorry. I'll change everything. The avoidant person deflects. You're being too sensitive. This is ridiculous. I need space. Both reactions are defensive maneuvers designed to regulate unbearable internal anxiety. The secure person doesn't need these defenses because they're not carrying the belief that conflict means catastrophe. They learned, usually in childhood, that ruptures can be repaired. That disagreement doesn't equal abandonment. That they can express needs without losing connection. This gives them an extraordinary capacity for authentic intimacy. I've observed this pattern in my own journey. There was a period when every disagreement felt existential. If you were frustrated with me, my entire identity would destabilize. I'd either frantically try to fix it or withdraw completely. The middle ground, simply being present with discomfort, felt impossible. The shift came when I began to recognize these patterns not as character flaws, but as adaptive strategies that had outlived their usefulness. The hypervigilance that once kept me safe in an unpredictable environment was now sabotaging adult relationships. The self-reliance that helped me survive emotional unavailability was now preventing genuine interdependence. This recognition was both liberating and challenging. Liberating because it meant I wasn't fundamentally broken. Challenging because it required developing entirely new neural pathways. I had to learn, as an adult, what secure children learn naturally. That connection can be safe. That needs can be expressed. That conflict doesn't mean the end. The practice looks simple but feels revolutionary. When you notice the anxious spiral beginning, pause. Breathe. Remind yourself, this feeling is familiar, but it's not necessarily accurate. My partner's need for space doesn't mean abandonment. It means they're regulating themselves so they can show up better. When you notice the avoidant shutdown starting, pause. Breathe. Remind yourself, this intimacy feels overwhelming, but it's not actually dangerous. I can tolerate this vulnerability without losing myself. These practices aren't about positive thinking or affirmations. They're about slowly reconditioning your nervous system's threat response. You're teaching your body that connection is safe, that vulnerability won't destroy you, that you can handle the full spectrum of human emotion without fragmenting. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. There's no magical breakthrough where suddenly everything changes. It's more like slowly tuning an instrument that's been out of tune your entire life. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice responding differently. Each conflict becomes a chance to choose connection over defense. Each moment of vulnerability becomes evidence that you can survive intimacy. And gradually, imperceptibly, something shifts. You notice you're not checking your phone compulsively when your partner doesn't text back immediately. You find yourself expressing needs without the old terror that you'll be seen as too much. You can sit with your partner's frustration without your whole world collapsing. The anxious noise in your head quiets. The urge to flee when things get close diminishes. This is earned security. Not the natural security of an idyllic childhood, but the hard-won security of conscious transformation. In some ways, it's even more profound because you understand it from the inside. You know what it costs. You know what you've overcome to get here. And perhaps that's what true freedom looks like, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to choose your response to it. Not immunity from pain, but the capacity to transform it into something meaningful. I've seen this transformation play out countless times. The student who struggled with anxiety becomes the counselor who creates safe spaces for others. The person who battled addiction becomes the sponsor who holds someone's hand through their darkest night. The one who survived abuse becomes the advocate who changes laws, who protects those who cannot yet protect themselves. Your wound becomes your wisdom, your breakdown becomes your breakthrough, and the very thing that almost destroyed you becomes the foundation of your greatest contribution to the world. But here's what nobody tells you about this transformation. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single moment of enlightenment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's a series of small choices, made over and over again, even when, especially when you don't feel like making them. It's choosing to get out of bed when depression whispers that nothing matters. It's choosing to be honest when anxiety screams that vulnerability will destroy you. It's choosing to stay present when every fiber of your being wants to numb out, to check out, to disappear into distraction. These small choices, they're not dramatic, they won't make headlines, but they're sacred. They're the real heroism of the human experience. And you know what I've learned? The people who make these choices, the ones who keep showing up despite everything, they develop a kind of quiet strength that's unshakable. Not because they're never afraid, but because they've learned to act in spite of fear. Not because they're never tired, but because they've discovered reserves of energy they didn't know they possessed. They become people who can hold space for others because they've learned to hold space for themselves. They become people who can offer genuine compassion because they've stopped judging their own struggles. They become people who can sit with discomfort because they've survived worse. This is the gift that struggle offers, not happiness, not ease, but capacity. The capacity to feel deeply without being destroyed by feeling. The capacity to love fully, knowing that loss is possible. The capacity to hope courageously even when evidence suggests despair. You're developing this capacity right now, whether you recognize it or not. Every day you survive, every moment you choose to keep going, you're expanding your ability to be fully human. You're becoming someone who can handle what life brings, not because you're invincible, but because you're learning that you can bend without breaking. And sometimes, that bending, that flexibility you've developed through hardship, it becomes your superpower. While others crack under pressure, you've learned to move with it. While others flee from difficulty, you've learned to walk toward it with your eyes open. This doesn't mean you never struggle. It means you've changed your relationship with struggle. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this teaching me?" Instead of waiting for life to get easier, you focus on becoming stronger, wiser, more resilient. The difference is profound. One approach leaves you paralyzed, the other transforms you. I've watched people in the most crushing circumstances, grief, failure, betrayal, loss, who somehow emerged, not just intact, but luminous. And when you ask them how they did it, they don't point to some miraculous event. They point to a decision, a quiet internal shift. I decided to stop fighting reality, they say. I decided to work with what was, not what should have been. This is the essence of emotional discipline, not to become numb or indifferent, but to choose your response consciously instead of reacting blindly. And here's what most people miss. This choice becomes easier the more you practice it. Your emotional patterns are like paths through a forest. The more you walk them, the deeper they become. If you habitually respond to difficulty with panic, that neural pathway strengthens. But if you repeatedly pause, breathe, and choose a different response, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new paths. Neuroscience confirms what ancient wisdom has always known: you can train your mind the way you train your body. Repetition builds capacity. Small, consistent choices compound into profound change. So what does this practice look like in daily life? It's choosing not to send that angry email immediately. Not because you're repressing your feelings, but because you know that rage is a terrible strategist. It's feeling the impulse, acknowledging it, and deciding to respond from clarity instead of chaos. It's disappointing someone without collapsing into guilt, understanding that you can't be everything to everyone, and that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's honesty. It's sitting with discomfort, instead of immediately reaching for your phone, food, or any other escape. Just being with what is. Discovering that most discomfort, when you actually face it, is far less threatening than the story your mind tells about it. It's recognizing that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is painful disconnection. Solitude is powerful presence with yourself, one you avoid, the other you cultivate. These aren't dramatic acts. They're quiet moments of sovereignty, and they accumulate. Each time you choose awareness over automaticity, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. The beautiful paradox is that as you develop this internal strength, your external life often shifts too. Not because you're trying to control outcomes, but because you're showing up differently. You're less reactive, more grounded. You're not radiating desperation or need, but presence and capability. People feel this. Opportunities respond to this. Life meets you at the level of your inner development. But even if nothing external changes, even if your circumstances remain challenging, you've fundamentally altered your experience. Because freedom isn't about your situation. It's about your state of being within any situation. This is why emotional maturity is the ultimate rebellion in a world that profits from your reactivity, your insecurity, your endless seeking. Every advertisement, every algorithm, every manufactured outrage wants you anxious, dissatisfied, impulsive. Your calm is revolutionary. Your contentment is subversive. Your ability to sit with yourself without distraction is a radical act.